Hey there. Welcome to episode 6 of Idea2Launch. My name is Lisa Zufall. I'm in studio today with Sarah Wick
Hello.
and Karen Borre from Shapeshifters Consulting.
Hi, everyone.
But before we get started, I just want to send a note out there to our sponsor today is Studio Americana, the studio that we are sitting in right now, professional studio here in the Twin Cities metro area, the only professional podcasting studio here in the Twin Cities. So if you were wondering if that's something that you want to get kicked off, Ian Levitt is the owner of Studio Americana and can get you hooked up. It is a beautiful space, and you won't be disappointed. Just come down and take a look at it. So thank you again to Studio Americana for having us here today. And we are going to get started. I am glad that you are here, Miss Karen Borre. Welcome.
I'm going to make a correction.
Okay.
Borre,
Borre.
double R.
Oh. Should
Friend-
we roll them?
We could roll it.
Borre.
Borre.
I like that better. Well, awesome. It's so great to have you here. Thanks for coming down. Thanks for joining us today.
It's been good. Thank you so much for having me.
You have, before we get started on all the details here, Shapeshifters Consulting is sales training.
It is sales training.
It's more than that.
It is. We do sales training along with organizational development, but a lot of people don't understand what organizational development is, so I don't use that as much. It's my end. Sales is my entry into organizations, and if in fact I see something, then I start doing organizational development.
So what does that mean?
Well,
Tell us more.
Well, when you, most of my business has been, I've been a training manager director at many organizations here in the Twin Cities. And in 2010, when the recession hit, we were going through what you call lots of layoffs. And I decided that I wanted to control my own destiny, and I wanted to get ready for, quote unquote, whatever retirement means.
Right.
And so I decided to, my husband had started up Shapeshifters back in 2002, and we had to put it on the shelf for a while because we had some family situations. So in 2010, I said, I'm taking it off the shelf, and I'm going to start Shapeshifters back up again, only rather than focus on process improvement and quality, which he was doing, I said, we're going to focus on sales training and organizational development. And I had been a sales manager in and out of a lot of different organizations. I had sold mutual funds. I'd sold training and development. I had sold high precision sheet metal. And so I had...
And there's one other thing that you did. What was that? When you were in an aircraft?
Oh, when I worked for Tenant Company, I trained mechanics on how to repair the tenant equipment. And so one of the things I volunteered to do was to write a contract for the government on how to clean aircraft carriers. So I raised my hand one day and I said, I think I need to go out on an aircraft carrier to see how the brakes work on the scrubber that was scrubbing the flight deck. And so they got me out on the Kitty Hawk. And I taught the flight crew of the Kitty Hawk how to scrub the air deck during flight operations.
I love this woman.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing? That's amazing. I love
So
that
yeah,
story.
I was out on the deck for 48 hours. So during flight ops, both at night, at midnight on the deck, and while they were actually practicing launches and takeoffs, and I was trying to scrub the deck in between them
Wow.
and back and forth. So yeah, it was a great time. I learned a lot about our military and what it's capable of doing. And a lot of us women don't really understand what our troops go through. So it's been pretty cool.
And you support the troops too.
Oh, I do support the troops. I've been working with several folks to help people that have come out of the military and are trying to start up new businesses and what it's like to start up a new business and the transition to do that back and forth. There's a little organizational development in there, and there's a lot of sales in there when you're trying to start up a business.
Right.
So when I left the corporate world and started up the business again, one of the things that I chose to do, because a lot of small organizations don't have the skill sets to do some of the things we do in large corporations.
Yep.
So my focus was on small manufacturing companies that needed sales training or a sales process, because at the front end of the business, there's money. And during that recession, people didn't have a lot of money for organizational development or leadership kinds of things. And well, they shouldn't. They needed to bring money in during the recession. So my focus was to go into these smaller companies and teach them a sales process and then how to embed that sales process in their organization so they could make money and have a good long-term embedded way to get their product out.
How easy was
Yeah.
it for you to convince them of this new sales process?
Um,
I know that was a loaded
that was
question.
a loaded question. One of the things that you have to, in small organizations, the leader at the top has to believe that they need a system and that he supports the system or she supports the
Right.
system. And the fact that they're going to do repetition in terms of it isn't a quick fix. And that you have to do this long term. And a lot of times in sales training, a problem exists. They think they can teach a process, and they're done. And now scads of money will come in.
Of course.
No.
Okay.
It's a long term process. And so I am pretty particular about who works. Who I work with in terms of where their motivation is to change the
Right.
process in an organization.
Because you need the higher ups running alongside of you, pushing it
Correct.
as well.
They need to role model parts of it, but they need to coach those folks that report to them in terms of how they're going to use the process. And that's probably the biggest piece out of all of it.
So what does that mean for a startup, for an entrepreneur? What kinds of tips or things do you think relays from, the organizational manufacturing world to an entrepreneur who's just getting started and understanding what they need to do?
I think the biggest thing for somebody who's doing a startup, especially, a lot of us that were doing the startups back in 2010 as well, or before the recession, you really need to know what your mission, vision, and values are. And those are, used words, buzzwords. People don't like using them. But unless you know where you're going and you know what value you bring and you can articulate that to somebody else,
Right.
it is very difficult to do the startup. And once you understand who you are at your core and how you're going to go present that, like Maggie had talked about earlier, I think it's critical that you know how to articulate that. And then once you can, what's your marketing plan to get your world?
Whoa,
Oh.
Karen, are you talking about a business plan? You're going down the road of a business plan.
Yes. Funny thing about that. And then once you get your plan put together, then how are you going to get other people to get on board with you?
Right.
So, yeah, I go down the mission, vision, values, the business plan, the marketing plan. Then you get your sales process in place, good to go. Because everything else will fall into place, I think, once those 4 elements are put together.
Right. Okay.
So there.
Absolutely.
There are big business plans and there are small business plans.
There are. And it doesn't have to be big. You just have to know what some key elements are so you can focus when you first start. After you start growing, then I think you can
You
get
add
into
to it. It's a growing, evolving document.
it. Is
Correct?
correct.
So for an entrepreneur who's just starting out and they went to build your business plan day somewhere at a library, right? And then they get completely overwhelmed because it's like 500 pages.
Oh,
What
We've all
advice-
seen them.
yes.
Well, and as a solopreneur or an entrepreneur who has a team of maybe 4 or 5, what do they do with that? I mean, can you give any advice as to how to tackle that or how to?
If you're a solopreneur, one of the things I think is critical is that you get yourself in a networking group of not necessarily maybe some single solopreneurs, but of people that are doing business not similar to yours. But there might be a real estate person, there might be a local shop there might be somebody like me, there might be, all kinds of different businesses, but you're still solopreneurs. So you can bounce ideas off of people that are different than you because sometimes they see things that you don't see.
Right.
And so I think, I'm actually in a couple different networking groups for that very reason. And I hope this doesn't sound too self-serving, but to find people like you guys to go, oh, what did you do that for?
We don't do that much, do we?
Tell me a little bit more about this, I believe is the phrasing that I like to use.
Oh, it's very interesting.
That's interesting. Can you tell me a little more about this?
Exactly, because you guys are the experts and we just have the product or service, but you need to find those key business people that you can't bring on board yet. Like people that do branding, like people that
Right.
help you with finance, like people that
And
hel-
sales.
and sales, so you can then build the business, but you've got to basically go out and find those people that you can network with in the beginning as you start up your business.
Know who you are, know where you're going, and know what you need,
Exactly.
and then pull those pieces together.
Pull those pieces together.
Awesome. So we were talking before the show about how Shapeshifters, the name, came to be, and we love the story so much that I think everybody should know why Shapeshifters. I mean, you could just be salesco.com.
Exactly.
My husband is a Trekkie fan. And so he was,
This is good.
this is good. So he was, when he was starting that business up in the Star Trek series, there's Odo, who is a shapeshifter.
Right.
And there's Q, who comes from the continuum. And I looked at Bob and I go, what are you thinking about? And he goes, shapeshifters. Shapeshifters bring wisdom to other worlds.
Oh.
And which is what the real piece was. So for a long time, we were just Shapeshifters Inc. But when I took over the business in 2010, I didn't like doing S corporation paperwork, so I changed it to an LLC.
Yeah.
And when I changed it to an LLC, Shapeshifters was gone. So I had to think up a new name. And when I was doing research to think up a new name but still include the word shapeshifters, I tripped across Shapeshifter Wrestling Magazine. And I go, oh, this is not transferring wisdom to new businesses. This is dangerous. And so I ultimately came up.
Unless you have a good tan.
Exactly.
Exactly. So not to be confused with the Shapeshifter Wrestling Magazine. This is Shapeshifters
Consulting.
Correct. So that's how and when I tell people, they say, what's your email? And I go, shapeshiftersconsulting.com because it's a long word, but nobody has that domain, and so it works.
Awesome. Which one, okay, out of all your services, because you have a lot of services on your website, out of all those services, which one do you think is the best for an entrepreneur if they were to hire you?
Sales. You have to know how to bring money in. When you're an entrepreneur, that's the prime piece you have to pay attention to.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, because I saw you in training and I saw you doing a little bit with the vets about sales. So there is a process. Can you kind of breeze over or talk high level about your process?
I'm certified in lots of different sales processes, so I'm kind of sales agnostic. Those organizations probably wouldn't like the fact that I said that, but I go in and look at what you need, and then I decide which one would work best for you.
Mhm.
But on the basic level, I use what's called action selling because it's very, very simple and it gets right to the root of what an entrepreneur needs to start with. So anybody, if you walk in to buy a car or you go in to buy a new pair of shoes, all of us have a process in our head that is just DNA worked, and we go through. And the first thing we look at is the salesperson. Are we going to buy you?
Right,
And if we don't buy you, we're not going to buy the product.
right.
So you have to know how to present yourself in a way that you'll buy your client will buy you. But one of the things that happens all too often is people go in, and I do it's called show up and throw up. What happens is you just go in and start blurping stuff about your product versus really getting to know what the client needs and really, really, truly listening to the client. So if, in fact, the client buys you first, and now you're in sync with their thinking process, then you've basically earned the right to talk about your company. Why would you be a good match for them based on what you've heard them say as
Right.
you've been asking questions? And then once you have you've also then earned the right, once you've talked a little bit about their need against your company, to then talk about your product, because now you've figured out that your product or service will in fact help them move their organization, their pain, something that they've got forward, because you've uncovered it. And once you've then
You're coming from a place of contribution
yes,
where you want to establish that relationship, get to know the person that's sitting across from you. On what are their fears? Where are they falling short? What do they need? So whether you're the resource or you find somebody else, at least you become that, you establish that relationship so you understand what their needs are going forward.
the
Is that fair?
yes, the relationship is actually key because you can't go in and start a relationship. There's a little thing a couple of us use is that pretend you're going on your first date. On your first date, you ask your significant other for a marriage. It's
In some countries, I think they do.
Yes.
yes, in some countries. Here in the States, though, we don't do so that.
No.
You have a process that you go
Right.
through, and the same thing happens in a client relationship. You have a process that you go through. And ultimately, yes, you do want them to ask about price, but price might not be monetary. Price might be the next meeting. It might be the time frame. It might be the next stage in your own process to understand about the client. But you do need to ask them for the next step, and we are horrible at asking for the next
I can
step.
personally say that I
Welcome to
am one of
Minnesota.
those.
Well, that's
I-
Minnesota nice wrapped up.
Passive aggressive?
That too. But a lot of times drop the aggressive part.
Yeah.
We have a lack of killer instinct
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
the state of Minnesota, for better or for worse.
Right.
Yeah, I've suffered that many times. How does somebody get past that and just ask for the sale or figure out what's the next step?
There's one little program that I teach. It's called the asking formula.
Okay.
And the asking formula is ask for what you want. But so often we don't ask for what we want, which is that next part. And so we have a little 6-step process that we teach people that we can be assertive and ask for what we want in a very professional way. And a lot of times I'll go in and teach that first before I teach sales process because then people get really clear about what they're asking for. But as a solopreneur or somebody starting up a business, you really have to ask for what you want
Right.
when you're out there working.
Otherwise, you're just kind of flapping your wings.
Yes.
You're not really going anywhere.
I was reminded when you and I had a conversation with a vet that was looking to start up a business, how key that was. Because he just wanted to compete with another organization, but he wasn't clear about how he was going to get there. And no matter
what he wanted.
and what he wanted. And that is just so clear when you're starting up a business that you need to be clear about it.
Which goes back to your business plan and your mission and your vision.
Yes.
So you just brought us full circle.
All the way around.
Get
I
those
like it.
pieces done first, so when you're sitting down creating those relationships, you know exactly what you're asking for.
What you're asking for, absolutely.
And it's meeting the needs of the person that you're talking to.
There's an old saying out there, WIIFM, what's in it for me?
Okay, I thought we might have to like bleep or something.
No. And what's in it for the other person sitting on the other side of the
Right.
table to talk to you?
Yeah.
And unless you start that relationship, you don't get to earn the right to go down those rest of those steps
Right.
because then you're not in sync with what they really need. So it's really about them. It's not about you.
Right. I love that.
So sales is partnership. And in today's environment, it's much more collaborative. It's much more about partnership. And most of your clients already know half about you before you walk in the door.
Right.
Because
The internet is a beautiful thing.
it's a beautiful thing. So sometimes you really have to be clear and really be able to articulate what you
Right.
want when you're sitting in front of somebody because somebody's going to come right in behind you and be able to do it better than you are.
Right. So, okay, we talked about the action selling process, and we are going to go to, how can the Twin Cities community, how can our Idea to Launch community support you, Karen? What can we do to promote you, support you, and help you build relationships?
Well, in all solopreneurs and in all small organizations, referrals are the key to lots of things. And so any kind of referral where you trip across organizations that really need to have a basic sales process or need some beginning leadership development would be the space that we would play in. But it's really about the sales side and really helping to coach a new sales manager or a VP that's starting up a new business and really needs to get off on the ground floors.
So, who's your ideal client? Is it the small business space, or are you willing to work with entrepreneurs, solopreneurs? Are you do you have any events coming up that they can see you at, or anything you'd like to plug here?
Yes, there's an event in the fall of which I don't have a date yet because I just looked at the space last week. There are three of us that work together on occasion. One is a finance and marketing guy, which is interesting to have finance and marketing together.
It is.
He's a CPA and a VP of marketing,
I
and
like it.
yeah, he's great at this. And then the other person that I work with is an HR individual, and she does a lot of HR audits. I say her big claim to fame is she keeps people out of trouble because a lot of times in small organizations, you don't know how you can get your butt in trouble sometimes.
Because they change the rules.
Yes, lots of times they change the rules. So given that, and then I do on the sales side, so we have put together some 2-hour seminars that you guys can, that the public can preview with us.
Okay.
And find out if we're a match for some of the issues you might have. And we'll probably,
Will it cost anything to come?
no,
Okay. So
it's a preview.
once you guys firm up the dates, let us know, and we'll be happy to post it on our side for
Okay.
our followers if they want to check you out.
Okay, that would be great.
Oh, is there anything else that we can do to support you?
Well, one of the reasons as I move into my senior years, that I decided to do this business for, 8 to 10 years as a business, but then to be able to give back to the community, which is one of the reasons I'm working with the vet stuff. My husband was in the Air Force for 22 years, and I did all the work on the aircraft carriers, and so I worked with the Navy a lot. And so I think both of us, and I did a lot of training at the in the Air Force for his unit that he was in. He was in civil engineering out of Fort Snelling. And in part of that is if there are the solopreneurs that have come out of the vet stuff, I am more than willing to help those folks figure out how to start up their businesses.
Awesome.
But even other organizations that really want to talk about how to be a solopreneur and some of the things it needs to do, but the sales piece is so important for a solopreneur. A lot of times we may know the technical side of a product, but we've got to be able to sell it.
Right?
Teach people
It took
to
me
talk.
many years.
Yes.
Many books and many.
That is so true, Sarah. It is teaching people to talk.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how you can talk in an organized way so people hear if you can help them do what it is that they want to do. So, yeah, from that perspective, I'd be more than willing to give back to the community, especially small organizations that they don't have the ability to hire us folks that have been in the corporate world and really get the same level of skill sets because they don't have the money for a full-time equivalent to do that kind of work.
Right.
So I'm willing to go in and do that as part of my give back to the community.
That's fabulous. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So we're just going to wrap it all up with final advice. Your mission, your values, have your roadmap, know where you're going to go,
Correct.
talk to your people or talk to somebody, reestablish those relationships. Was I listening?
Yes. and as you say, listening, one of the things, active listening it's a fine art.
Right.
And you never can learn too much about that fine art of listening. But listen to really understand, not listen so I can get to my next step.
Right.
And be really engaged that you really care about the person on the other side of the table, not that you're just trying to sell your product. Yes,
Right.
you are, but you need to know if that's a fit or not.
Right.
So
And if it's not a fit, don't try and fit a square peg in a round hole.
say thank you for your time and be
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
Know when to fail and know when to say no.
Right. I think that's the biggest piece, though, because sometimes as an entrepreneur, because I've been in the realms for a while, it's really hard to figure out, do I let this one go or do I just keep
We al-
chipping away at it?
We always want to chase the carrot,
Yeah.
and especially those of us in sales. But I think the biggest thing also in sales, one of the biggest things is if it isn't a fit, say thank you, and no is no, and move
Right.
on. You're
Yep.
wasting your time
Right.
if you continually try to say, well, maybe I'll try one more time.
Right.
No, it's
Yeah.
not a fit.
And
Go.
You don't, and,
We
you,
call that-
and as an entrepreneur, you just don't have that kind of time.
No.
It's a lot of
No.
wasted time and effort and energy.
We call
Absolutely.
that chasing the wrong dollars.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So how can people get a hold of you, Karen? We're going to have your website link on the podcast
Okay.
so when it posts. But how can they call you?
Yeah, my office number is 952-933-5564. And I'll say this wonderfully long website again. Karen.Borre@shapeshifters, www.idea2launchconsulting.com.
Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Karen
Karen.
Borre, for coming in.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been fun. I enjoy it.
Hopefully you'll come back and see us again.
I will. We'll have a
Wonderful.
new lesson.
Oh, that would be great.
Perfect.
I love it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
if you like our podcast, please subscribe, like, and share. Thanks for joining us today.